Hello, this is Claudia, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the New York Times February 25th issue of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Mexico is caught between Trump and the cartels. President Trump has demanded President Claudia Sheinbaum confront the cartels. The killing of El Mencho suggests it might be working, but it could come at a cost. El Mencho was the biggest kingpin left, the drug lord whose real name was Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes had evaded capture for 2 decades, outlasting his rivals, El Chapo and El Mayo, and building his Jalisco New Generation cartel into Mexico's most powerful criminal organization. Then over the weekend, his run came to an abrupt end, in part because of a romantic rendezvous. The killing was a clear success for the Mexican authorities. The timing, however, seemed to be telling. President Trump has been loudly and repeatedly demanding that Mexican officials dismantle the cartels that have amassed fortunes by sending drugs across the border. If they don't, he has threatened the U.S. military may do the job instead. Those threats appear to be having an effect. President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico has overseen one of the most aggressive offenses against the cartels in more than a decade. On Sunday, weeks after Mr. Trump ordered a military intervention in Venezuela and warned that Mexico was next, Ms. Sheinbaum took another bold swing. She authorized Mexican forces to take out her nation's most wanted criminal, using intelligence provided by the United States. The killing of Mr. Oseguera shows how the tense interplay between Mr. Trump and Ms. Sheinbaum, 2 leaders with starkly different styles, but an unlikely camaraderie, has fundamentally reshaped the U.S.-Mexico relationship, particularly on security. The pressure that Trump has put on her administration has been a force she's taken advantage of, said Carlos Bravo Regidor, a Mexican political analyst who studies U.S.-Mexico relations. She wanted to change Mexico's security, but Trump came at a very interesting moment to push her in that direction. Yet, Mr. Bravo added, Ms. Sheinbaum is also playing with fire. I don't know if she wanted to go as far as she's going, he added. This is clearly putting her administration under a lot of stress, and there is a big question now of what are the Mexican states' capacities to govern the consequences of this operation. Like with the mythological monster, the Hydra cutting off one head of a cartel often spawns many more. Killing Mr. Oseguera unleashed a wave of shootings, arson, and blockades across the country, and now Mexicans are bracing for even more violence ahead as competing factions jockey for power and confront the government. It is a cycle Mexico has lived through many times before. It is also the latest example of Mr. Trump's growing impact on Latin America, Venezuela, Cuba, Colombia, Argentina, Honduras, and others all can attest. In her daily news conference on Tuesday, Ms. Sheinbaum pushed back on the notion that she was acting in response to Mr. Trump, calling any speculation about that almost laughable to read. Ms. Sheinbaum has consistently sought to set boundaries with Washington, just as Mr. Trump's wish to strike Mexico has become a regular part of his rhetoric, so has her refrain about protecting Mexico's sovereignty. On Monday, she repeated the limits on the American role. There is no participation of U.S. forces, she told reporters. The understanding with the United States is based primarily on the exchange of intelligence. Ms. Sheinbaum confirmed that U.S. agencies provided intelligence for the operation against Mr. Oseguera, and the New York Times reported Monday that critical information came from the CIA. The CIA declined to comment. Mexico's defense secretary also credited American agencies with assistance, but said the break in the case came when Mexican intelligence officials identified an associate of one of Mr. Oseguera's lovers, who then led the authorities to the cartel leader's hideout. It is clear the 2 sides have improved cooperation. In January, the U.S. military set up an intelligence sharing task force in Arizona, about 15 miles from the Mexico border. The force has roughly 300 military and civilian staff who study their cartels, their leadership, logistics, and financial operations. To feed intelligence to the Mexican authorities, the task force aided the raid on Mr. Oseguera, the Times reported. From 2008 to 2023, the United States spent $3.6 billion on bilateral security with Mexico, but it was not always so collaborative. One classified U.S. intelligence program investigated top targets in Mexico, but kept the information from the Mexican authorities. That secretive approach was partially validated when numerous Mexican officials were shown to be corrupted by the cartels. John Feely, a top U.S. diplomat in Mexico from 2009 to 2012, said it appeared the tides were shifting. The big difference always was that we never had full buy-in from the Mexicans, he said. The recent successes, he added, show that with Mexico at least the United States needed to bring more pressure to bear to create the moment of political will. Still, the Mexican authorities had tried to catch Mr. Azaguera before. In 2012, he escaped with his cartel blocked roads with burning vehicles. In 2015, his gunmen shot down a Mexican military helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade, killing 3 soldiers. Those were under more conservative presidents. Under Ms. Sheinbaum's leftist predecessor and political benefactor Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, Mr. Azaguera appeared to face less pursuit. Mr. Obrador's hugs, not bullets, approach to solving Mexico's violence by addressing root causes led to rising violence. It has also badly fractured the U.S.-Mexico security relationship. 2 cartel bosses were caught under Mr. Lopez Obrador's watch. The first, Ovidio Guzman Lopez, a son of El Chapo and a leader of the Sinaloa cartel, was promptly released after his followers wreaked havoc in response to his capture. The second, Ismael Zambada Garcia, or El Mayo, a co-founder of the same cartel, was captured by the American authorities when they persuaded his ally to turn on him and take him to the United States. Ms. Sheinbaum has proved to be a far more willing partner in the fight against the cartels. The question always was, is Claudia going to emerge from AMLO's shadow, Mr. Feely said, referring to Mr. Lopez Obrador by his initials. She has not only emerged, she has cut a new level of security engagement from a whole new cloth. Now that Ms. Sheinbaum has eliminated Mexico's most wanted cartel boss, will Mr. Trump lay off the threats? On Monday morning, less than 24 hours after arguably Mexico's biggest achievement in its cartel war in years, Mr. Trump posted a message online for his neighbor. Mexico must step up their effort on cartels and drugs. Pope Leo to visit Africa, signaling continent's importance to Catholicism. The number of Roman Catholics is growing faster in Africa than anywhere else, according to the Vatican. The Vatican announced on Wednesday that Pope Leo would make a 10-day trip to Africa in April, traveling to Algeria, Angola, Cameroon, and Equatorial Guinea less than a year after he was elected to the papacy. The trip to Africa so early in Leo's tenure appeared to signal the importance of a continent where Roman Catholicism is growing faster than anywhere else. The number of Catholics grew by more than 15 million worldwide from mid-2022 to mid-2023, more than half of them in Africa, according to the most recent statistics published by the Vatican. The continent also produces more trainee priests than any other, though Africans are underrepresented in the Church senior leadership. Leo's predecessor, Pope Francis, increased the number of African cardinals, but did not visit the continent until he had been in office for more than 2 years. Though it will be Leo's first trip to Africa as Pope, he visited the continent regularly as leader of the Augustinian Order from 2001 to 2013, and also during the 2 years in which he headed a department at the Vatican that oversees the appointment of bishops. The Augustinian Order traces its roots to the teachings of St. Augustine, who was born in the 4th century in what is now Algeria. During a visit to Tanzania in 2003, Leo made a 470-mile trip in a car which he drove himself, Bishop Stefano Muzamba, a Tanzanian cleric, said in an interview with a local newspaper last May. Leo's love of long-distance driving is well documented. In November, on his first international trip since he was elected as Pope, Leo traveled to Turkey and Lebanon, where he tried to strengthen ties with Islamic leaders and with the Orthodox Church. On the return flight to Rome, Leo was asked about future trips, and he expressed his desire to travel to Africa, and specifically to Algeria to visit the places of St. Augustine, but also in order to continue the conversation of dialogue, of building bridges between the Christian world and the Muslim world. Nearly a fifth of all Roman Catholics are Afrikaans, a proportion that is not reflected in the Church's hierarchy. There are currently 245 cardinals, about half of whom are under 80, and can therefore vote in a conclave to choose a pope. Africa has 29 cardinals, roughly half of them under 80. Nearly two-thirds were appointed by Pope Francis, who made the Church leadership more geographically diverse. Roughly 280 million people, about a fifth of Africa's population, are Roman Catholic. Pope Paul VI was the first pope to visit Africa, traveling to Uganda in 1969. His successor, John Paul II, visited the continent 13 times. From 1980 to 2000, Benedict traveled to Africa twice during his papacy, and Francis, who died last year, went 4 times from 2015 to 2023. When Francis visited the Democratic Republic of Congo during his last trip to the continent, he sought to encourage peace in an overwhelmingly Christian country that has known little of it. The Vatican said that in Algeria, Leo would spend April 13th through 15th in Algiers and Annaba, which stands on the site of Hippo, the ancient city where St. Augustine lived. In Cameroon, he will travel to Yaoundé, Bamenda, Douala from April 15th to 18th before visiting Luanda, Muxima, and Sorimo in Angola from April 18th to the 21st. The final stops are in Equatorial Guinea, where Leo will visit Malabo, Mongomo, and Bata from April 21st to the 23rd. Leo will also make a one-day trip to the Principality of Monaco on March 28th, and he will go to Spain in June for a 6-day visit, the Vatican said. Louvre director resigns months after burglars stole crown jewels. Laurence Descartes' departure is the latest setback. For the world's largest museum, her tenure was marred by labor strikes, water leaks, a ticket scam, and security lapses, which led to the heist in October. Laurence Descartes, the first female president of the Louvre Museum, resigned on Tuesday, less than 5 months after an audacious theft raised thorny questions about security at one of the world's most famous museums. Ms. Descartes submitted her resignation to the French president, Emmanuel Macron, who had appointed her in 2021, and championed her plans for an ambitious refurbishment of the museum known as Louvre New Renaissance. The president's office said in a statement that Mr. Macron had accepted Ms. Descartes' resignation as an act of responsibility at a time when the world's largest museum needs both stability and strong new impetus to successfully complete major security and modernization projects. Ms. Descartes' resignation came a day before she was scheduled to testify before the French Parliament about security issues in the aftermath of the theft of a collection of jewels which were valued at more than $100 million. Her departure leaves the New Renaissance project in flux. Mr. Macron views the project as one of his signature cultural legacies, but it has aroused widespread criticism both because of its expense and because of the proposed changes to the layout of the Louvre. The heist was only one of a series of misfortunes that befell the Louvre under Ms. Descartes' watch, which included water damage to antique books, the forced closing of a gallery because of structural weaknesses, cascades of strikes by museum workers, and a ticket fraud scheme that cost the museum nearly $12 million. Each setback chipped away at Ms. Descartes' reputation and her political backing. Ms. Descartes, age 59, offered to resign in the immediate aftermath of the theft, but her offer was rejected by France's cultural minister, Rachida Dati, who is effectively her boss, but Ms. Dati, who is now running for mayor of Paris, tried to appoint a senior civil servant, Philippe Jost, to work alongside Ms. Descartes to overrule the management of the Louvre. The appointment was never happened, but the rumors of it were seen as a humiliating verdict on her leadership. Ms. Descartes initially said that a key security camera was facing the wrong way during the heist, an explanation that was later contradicted by investigators who found that the burglars were in fact caught on camera. In an interview with the New York Times a month after the theft, Ms. Descartes acknowledged the reputational damage that the burglary had done. "It is a wound that I will certainly carry all my life," she said. But Ms. Descartes defended her record at the Louvre, pointing out that she had long called attention to weaknesses in the museum's security. She said she had worked to marshal government support to renovate the glorious but dangerously debilitated palace, parts of which date back to 1190. Just weeks after the heist, the discovery of structural weaknesses in beams forced the closure of a marquee gallery that housed Greek ceramics. When you take charge of this museum, you know very well that it is a political, diplomatic, and cultural symbol, and that it is constantly subject to very intense controversies, said Ms. Descartes, a specialist in 19th century art, who had led the Musée d'Orsay before taking over the Louvre. I know that from the start. I didn't know that I would, of course, have the current crisis to manage, but one learns a lot. A spokesman for the Louvre said that the museum and Ms. Descartes declined to comment. Ms. Descartes said in an interview published by a French paper, Le Figaro, shortly after her resignation was announced, that she accepted a share of the blame for the security failures that led to the heist, but she added the guilty parties, those who ordered the attack, are still at large. Ms. Descartes insisted that her proposed changes would eventually transform the Louvre, though she acknowledged that they had drawn stiff resistance. Perhaps I am paying the price for that today, she said. I have no regrets. Even after the heist, Ms. Descartes retained the support of many on the Louvre staff, but she never fully recovered from the storm of criticism that followed the sensational theft, a crime carried out in broad daylight by thieves who broke into the museum after climbing up a truck-mounted electric ladder. The cinematic details captured headlines and inspired comedy routines around the world. The Cour des Comptes, France's top auditing institution, published a damning audit of the Louvre, saying that there was no security master plan and that its security systems were aging. It faulted the museum's leaders for focusing on buying artwork and designing showrooms at the cost of basic upkeep. The theft of the crown jewels is without a doubt a deafening alarm signal, said the auditor's president, Pierre Moscovici. The auditors were similarly scathing about the new Renaissance project, which they said was too costly. At 1.1 billion euros or $1.3 billion, under the plans, the Louvre would move the Mona Lisa, its most popular painting, to its own room with an entrance separate from IMP's pyramid at the Louvre's current entrance. The auditors said that money should be spent on beefing up security. For Mr. Macron, who announced the new Renaissance project while standing in front of the Mona Lisa, the turmoil could jeopardize what he had hoped would be a cultural legacy on par with those left by previous French presidents. Georges Pompidou commissioned the cultural hub that later took his name, the Pompidou Center, while François Mitterrand initiated the construction of the Bastille Opera and the Louvre's pyramid entrance. Because the new Renaissance plan is so closely identified with Mr. Macron, it has inevitably been caught up in French politics. Its checkered reputation is reflecting its waning popularity as he enters the final year of his second presidential term. A correction was made on February 24, 2026. An earlier version of this article misstated the time between Laurent Descartes' resignation and the burglary at the Louvre. It was less than 5 months, not less than 3. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In Windsor, some see family drama in the Andrew accusations. Her children have let her down, said one woman, referring to Queen Elizabeth II. Andrew Montauban, Windsor's fall from grace, drew strong reactions from some. Others said they just did not care. The news cameras faithfully kept vigil this week in Windsor, England, outside the gates of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's former home, where the police continued their searches, and locals who flocked to the rambling green space of Windsor Estate to walk, bike, run, or ride horses continued to debate the impact of the scandal unfolding around him. Andrew's time is up, said Sue Jones, age 70, who lives in Windsor and was walking to lunch with 2 friends on an unexpectedly mild Monday, as she commented on the accusations against Mr. Mountbatten Windsor, who was known as Prince Andrew until late last year. If it had happened in Tudor times, he would have been slung in the Tower of London. Her friend Madeleine Beckley, age 59, had sympathy for his mother. I think it's a good job that Queen isn't here anymore for all of this, she said, adding she didn't put a foot wrong, and it's such a shame that her children have let her down. Others were less involved, reflecting a public that has become either increasingly apathetic or negative about the monarchy. Honestly, I do not care at all about him, said Jenny Finnerty, who lives nearby. I've got my own family to worry about. Mr. Mountbatten Windsor was arrested last week and released 11 hours later as part of an investigation into allegations of misconduct in public office. The accusations are connected to his relationship with the sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. He has not been charged with any crime. The news has dominated headlines around the world, especially on the front pages of British newspapers. Many outlets prominently featured an image of Mr. Mountbatten Windsor looking shell-shocked as he slumped in the back of a vehicle that was leaving the police station. The Daily Mail carried the headline "Downfall" and described the former prince as looking haggard, shamed, and haunted. The Sun accompanied the photo with the headline "Now He's Sweating," referring to a disastrous 2019 BBC interview in which Mr. Mountbatten Windsor disputed the account of Virginia Giuffre, who said he was sweating when dancing with her at a club in 2001. He said he was not with her that night and added he was unable to sweat because of a medical condition, an assertion that prompted ridicule and backlash. For years, Mr. Mountbatten Windsor has been fighting off accusations that he sexually abused Miss Giuffre. He settled a lawsuit she brought against him, paying her an undisclosed amount and also denying any wrongdoing. Last week, his brother, King Charles III, issued a statement offering the authorities in Britain his full and wholehearted support and cooperation in the investigation into misconduct in public office. But the steady drip of revelations against Mr. Mountbatten Windsor's relationship with Mr. Epstein, even after the financier's conviction in 2008, had already taken a toll on national perceptions of the royal family. Polls show a dent in the unusually high levels of overall support. In an Ipsos poll earlier this month, the number of Britons with a favorable opinion of the king had dipped below 50%. That poll was taken before Mr. Mountbatten Windsor's arrest, but after the recent release of a large tranche of files related to Mr. Epstein. The poll also showed a drop in the number of people who thought the royal family had handled the scandal well, to 28% this month from 37% in November. Young people tend to be less positive about the royal family than older Britons. Kieran Pedley, UK researcher director for Ipsos, said that despite the damage, the monarchy remains a popular institution and that nothing in the data at the moment suggests it is in jeopardy. It's an open question as to how resilient the institution will be in the post-Elizabeth era, he added, but said it remained crucial to understand what younger Britons think after the 2022 death of the much-loved Elizabeth II. Nathan Brindle, age 21, and Zara Van Der Vorm, age 18, who were walking their dogs near Royal Lodge in Windsor on Monday, said the news about Mr. Mountbatten Windsor had barely registered with them of their peers. The 30-room royal mansion was the former prince's home for 2 decades before King Charles III evicted him earlier this month. Since Lizzie died, because everyone did really like her, no one really has any name for them, Mr. Brindle said, using an affectionate nickname for Queen Elizabeth. The royal family is old and outdated, and most people of our generation just don't care about it. Still, Mr. Brindle said he was glad to see someone being investigated for potential wrongdoing revealed by the Epstein files, and added that he wanted to see more powerful people held accountable. Despite being stripped of nearly all of the benefits of royal life, from his mansion to his titles, Mr. Mountbatten Windsor remains 8th in line to the throne, a status that can be changed only by an act of Parliament. The governing Labour Party has said that it would consider introducing legislation to prevent the former prince from ever becoming king, but that the process would be complicated and could begin only after the police inquiry ended. Removing Mr. Mountbatten Windsor from the line of succession would also require the nations of the British Commonwealth, where the king remains the head of state, to agree. Australia and New Zealand, both part of the Commonwealth, have voiced support. The bottom line is no one is above the law, and once that investigation is closed, should the UK government decide to remove him from the line of succession, that is something we would support, Prime Minister Christopher Luxon of New Zealand said on Tuesday. Campaigners from Republican anti-monarchy group on Monday called for a wide-ranging royal inquiry. During Elizabeth's reign, Windsor was the center of royal activity. Windsor Castle was her primary home in her final years, and she was buried there. The wedding of Prince Harry to his American-born wife Meghan in 2018 saw stars and royals alike descend on the town. The royal family even takes its name from the medieval fortress, so the scandal involving Mr. Mountbatten Windsor felt deeply personal to some here this week. Pat Walker, age 82, who was visiting Windsor on Monday from her home in Derbyshire in northern England, said she had vivid memories of the Queen's coronation in 1953, and she wasn't impressed with how the next generation has behaved. He is a disgrace to the royal family, she said of Mr. Mountbatten Windsor. Nearby gaggles of teenage boys dressed in crisp white shirts and black jackets, the recognizable uniform of the prestigious Eton College Boys' School, chatted loudly as they hustled by on the narrow sidewalks. Jack Slack, age 73, had a slightly different take, objecting to how the king had handled the long-running saga of his brother and Mr. Epstein. He said he believed the country deserved more transparency about their relationship and what the royal family had known. When things go wrong with the royal family, they are very quiet, he said. We don't want to be told lies. We want the truth. Thanks, Ukrainians say, but please stop calling us resilient. Russian attacks had left Chechnya, Shatelia with no water, heat, or reliable electricity during a brutal winter, so when the power briefly flickered back on one recent day in Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, she took an electric clipper, stepped up to a mirror, and strand by strand shaved off her blonde hair. While her young daughter was not happy, Miss Shatilia, age 37, would no longer have to worry about not being able to wash her hair. I had a problem and I solved it, she said, but please don't call her resilient. For 4 years, the people of Ukraine have been celebrated abroad for their perseverance in the face of hardship, the smaller country that bravely stood up to Vladimir V. Putin's Russia. President Vladimir Zelensky himself had called Ukrainians unbreakable. Miss Shatelia and many others, however, say they are fed up, both with hardship and with being called resilient in the face of it. I see myself as a weak little girl who just wants to cry but can't, said Miss Shatelia, a cook in a fast food restaurant. Ukrainians have been posting on social media that they no longer want to be labeled unbreakable. They are not superhuman. They break like anybody else. They experience pain. They want the world to know that and to offer compassion and help. If you present Ukrainians primarily by focusing on strength, people might think they don't need support, that they are fine by themselves, said Jonas Kunst, a social psychologist at the BI Norwegian Business School. They aren't fine by themselves, but Ukraine must project strength. If it appears to be losing or giving up, that could jeopardize support. It needs to survive money and weapons from Western allies. We have become the hostages of our heroic image, said Ola Donich, a social psychologist in Kiev. Mr. Zelensky acknowledged this sentiment in a speech marking the war's 4th anniversary on Tuesday. He praised Ukrainians for their, yes, resilience, but also said they were human, not made of steel. Many Ukrainians do see themselves as strong and inventive. The only unsolvable problem is when you are in the cemetery, said Alanya Zordarenko, age 38, who with her husband, Serhiy, age 40, trains children in martial arts. But as she watched her son and daughter during training, she admitted she did not want them to have the life they have now. February has been a cruel month with hundreds of thousands in Kiev left without heat, as nightly lows reached about minus 10 degrees Celsius or 14 degrees Fahrenheit. Ukrainians say that Russia has spoiled the first beautiful snowy winter in years. Katerina Chapurna, age 39, a drama teacher, said life was on pause. Her apartment has been cold enough at night for water to start to freeze. She is fighting mold climbing her walls. Her children keep getting sick. She is divorced from the father of her first daughter, but cannot live with the father of her second daughter either. Both are in the army. Everything is on me, she said. This is sad and scary. I do not feel strong enough to live through it. When a Russian missile hit the power plant across Lyudmila Dubichenko's home, causing a large fire, she ran outside. She was scared. Miss Dubichenko, age 62, told neighbors a different story, joking that she was just trying to warm up next to the fire, she said. A neighbor, Andrei Holobavinsky, age 39, heard his 10-year-old son screaming after the missile strike. He ran into his room and saw the boy on the bed covered in glass and Lego bricks. He and others said they could not afford to be weak. My brother is sleeping in a trench at minus 20 and you want me to complain? Mr. Hoblovitsky asked. What did he make of all this? I feel anger, he said. Yuri Samolany, who is from western Ukraine, came to Kiev this month to cook food for people over a fire. He had loaded meat and friends into a car. He saw nothing special in it. I just saw you struggling here in Kiev, so I came, he said. Yakovina Tashkanova, age 37, and her neighbors wrapped old clothes around pipes in their building near the Dnipro River in Kiev so they would not freeze. She also saw nothing special in that. If any other country were attacked like us, its people, just like us, would unite and protect their homes, she said. In a nursery, nannies fighting the chill by filling plastic bottles with hot water and wrapping colorful towels around them to make them look like candy. Children hug their warm candies when they nap in their frigid room. Most of the nannies have husbands at war. Their homes are cold. Of course I'm tired, said one of them, Ina Kaminsk. Age 39, I'm not a robot. She put the children to bed, giving each a warm candy. Sometimes I just want someone to hold me close, the way you would hold a little child. Miss Kaminch said, I don't want to be called strong. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. News analysis. Trump puts on a show, casting Democrats as the villains. On the defensive over the economy and with the midterms approaching, President Trump made clear that his political strategy is to paint Democrats as unpatriotic and crazy. It was a spectacle as survival strategy. In his State of the Union address, President Trump didn't bother to introduce a raft of new policies unusual in a midterm election year with control of Congress on the line. He did not seem concerned with making the case that he gets it when it comes to the issue Americans are most worried about. Affordability, he said, was part of a dirty, rotten lie perpetrated by the Democrats. Instead, with the slashing style of a natural campaigner and the instincts of a one-time reality television producer, he spent the better part of 2 hours baiting the ranks of incensed Democrats in the chamber and endeavoring to define them to the electorate as sick, unpatriotic, and utterly out of step with the values of most Americans. These people are crazy. I'm telling you, they're crazy, Mr. Trump said at one point while relaying the story of a young person who had been forced to undergo a gender transition. Boy, oh boy, we're lucky we have a country with people like this. Democrats are destroying our country, but we've stopped it just in the nick of time. Going into the speech, Mr. Trump knew that he needed to use it to maneuver out of a politically treacherous moment for himself and his party. A majority of Americans oppose how Mr. Trump is pursuing his anti-immigration agenda, and more than 70% of them think his priorities are in the wrong place. His approval rating has plummeted to a 41%. His solution was to wrap himself in the imagery of American heroism with staged asides throughout the speech while throwing the blame for every problem from the security of elections to the state of the economy back on his opponents. In a number of cases, Democrats gave Mr. Trump the confrontations he sought. Representative Al Green of Texas, who was ejected from the chamber last year for waving his cane at Mr. Trump, was once again removed after he held up a sign proclaiming, "Black people aren't apes," a reference to a racist video Mr. Trump recently shared on social media. Representative Lauren Underwood of Illinois got up and walked out rather than take another minute of the speech, and Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, a frequent target of Mr. Trump's, was one of a handful who yelled at him. "You've killed Americans," she shouted as Mr. Trump talked about immigration enforcement. "You should be ashamed of yourself," the president shot back. But if Mr. Trump drew the contrast he wanted to draw inside the chamber, it was not clear how much effect his performance would have outside of it, where the political realities for him and his party are bracing. The killing of U.S. citizens by immigration agents and scenes of children being detained have undercut public approval for his deportation campaign, despite his success in largely closing the border to illegal immigration. His base remains fixated on the Jeffrey Epstein files and whether the administration has been fully transparent in making public all that is known about those who consorted with him, including Mr. Trump. Last week, the Supreme Court struck down Mr. Trump's preferred method for implementing tariffs, a keystone of his economic and foreign policy agenda. If Mr. Trump felt offensive about any of this, it came out as defiant. On Tuesday evening, as he looked at a row of stone-faced Supreme Court justices and told them that his tariff plans would continue under the legal power that I, as president, have to make a new deal. Democrats, sensing divides among Republicans about how Mr. Trump is pursuing his agenda and seeing polling moving their way, remain confident about the midterm elections. In a rebuttal address for the Democrats, Governor Abigail Spanberger of Virginia said Mr. Trump had largely avoided the concerns of everyday Americans. He lied, he scapegoated, and he distracted, Ms. Spanberger said. She closed her speech with a call for Democrats running in this fall's midterms to focus on the economy. During the speech, Mr. Trump tried to shift the focus to his preferred topics. He offered little explanation about why he is threatening to launch more military strikes against Iran, saying that he would prefer to end the country's nuclear program through diplomacy, but that he would never allow Tehran to have a nuclear weapon. Can't let that happen. Circling always back to Democrats, he called them cheaters and liars, assailing them for their opposition to legislation that purports to address his unfounded claims of widespread election fraud. He said that he had appointed Vice President J.D. Vance to combat the corruption that shreds the fabric of a nation by tackling widespread fraud, name-checking several Democratic-controlled states, including Minnesota and California. Mr. Trump, who has himself been convicted on fraud charges, then suggested that the vice president may be able to clear up the budget deficit. He'll get it done, Mr. Trump said, and we're able to find enough of that fraud. We will actually have a balanced budget overnight. Mr. Trump kicked off his discordant address dutifully enough, hailing a golden age of America, where the stock market is at record highs, retirement accounts are overflowing, and new investments are coming into the country by the trillion. Everybody's up, way up, Mr. Trump said. He touted the influx of 80 million barrels of oil from our new friend and partner Venezuela, without first mentioning the U.S. military's audacious capture of the country's leader. But it did not take long for Mr. Trump to switch into MC mode. He invited the gold medal winning U.S. men's hockey team into the chamber, spending several minutes associating himself with their victory and announcing the first of several awards he doled out, a Presidential Medal of Freedom for Team USA's goalie Connor Hellebuyck. This will be a year to celebrate our country and the heroes who kept it free, Mr. Trump said. The speech descended into division from there. As he recounted, sometimes in graphic detail, the stories of people who persevered through unimaginable tragedies or survived violence, Mr. Trump seemed attuned to whether or not Democrats were standing and applauding each person. He recounted the murder of Irene Zaruska, a Ukrainian woman who was stabbed to death on a train last year, in graphic detail. Mr. Zaruska's mother was in the chamber weeping as the president spoke. Mr. Trump finished telling Mr. Zaruska's story and turned immediately to the Democrats. How do you not stand? Mr. Trump asked. With one manufactured moment after another, it became clear that the goal of the speech was not to unveil new policies nor acknowledge the anxieties of Americans who find housing too expensive or who are struggling to pay bills. Instead, Mr. Trump created the sort of social media-ready content that his administration has thrived on to push through one unflattering news cycle into the next. Ever aware of the camera, Mr. Trump said that he wanted Americans to see clearly what their representatives really believe and asked every person seated in the chamber to make a choice. So tonight I'm inviting every legislator to join with my administration in reaffirming a fundamental principle, Mr. Trump said. If you agree with this statement, then stand up and show your support. The first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens. Several Democrats stayed seated. Mr. Trump, failing to mention the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, U.S. citizens, by immigration agents in Minnesota, basked in the applause from Republicans before his eyes slid over to the other side of the room. Isn't that a shame? Mr. Trump said. You should be ashamed of yourself. Not standing up. You should be ashamed of yourself. Stephen Miller, the architect of Mr. Trump's immigration policies, quickly jumped on social media to make the point of the stagecraft explicit. The seated Democrats, he said, is the most shocking image in the history of U.S. Congress. Congress has seen its share of shocking images over the years, and Mr. Trump was delivering his address inside the same chamber that a mob of supporters tried to storm a little more than 5 years earlier in an effort to keep him in an office despite his election loss. Mr. Trump, a target of several assassination attempts, recounted the killing of the conservative activist Charlie Kirk. He had another request for Americans. We must totally reject political violence of any kind. Supreme Court sides with couple in case involving baby food sold at Whole Foods. The court agreed to revive a lawsuit by a Texas couple who claimed that tainted baby food purchased at Whole Foods had sickened their young son. The Supreme Court cleared the way on Tuesday for a Texas couple who claimed that tainted baby food had sickened their son to press ahead with a lawsuit against Whole Foods. In a unanimous decision, the court agreed that the couple should be able to continue to pursue their lawsuit in state court. In opinion written by Justice Sonia Sotomayor, the court found that a federal appeals court had correctly cleared the way for the couple to continue their legal fight, writing that the couple had exercised their right to choose to bring a lawsuit in state court. In 2021, Sarah and Grant Palmquist sued the grocery chain and an organic baby food maker, arguing that food bought at the store had harmed their young son. The couple said that their son Ethan had normal development until he was 2.5 years old. He then suddenly regressed and was diagnosed with seizures and autism spectrum disorder. Tests showed that the boy had high levels of toxic metals in his body. The couple asserted in court filings and showed signs of heavy metal poisoning. The Palmquists blamed their son's medical problems on his nearly exclusive diet of Earth's Best organic baby food, a brand made by the Hain Celestial Group that the family bought at Whole Foods. In their lawsuit, they pointed to a 2021 report from the House Oversight Committee that found that certain commercial baby foods, including Earth's Best, were tainted with significant levels of toxic heavy metals, including arsenic, lead, cadmium, and mercury. The baby food manufacturer had argued that the couple improperly added Whole Foods to the case in order to keep it in state court, which is genuinely thought to be friendlier for plaintiffs. A federal judge agreed and dismissed the claims against Whole Foods. The couple eventually lost the suit after a jury trial. The judge dismissed their case, finding that the couple's theory that their son's health issues has been caused by the baby food was simply not supported by science. The couple appealed. The appeals court did not rule on the merits of their claim, but in a May 2024 decision, found the trial court had erred when it removed Whole Foods from the case. A 3-judge panel for the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit ordered that the case be sent back to state court to start over from scratch. Hain Celestial Group then asked the Supreme Court to weigh in. Lawyers for the company argued that the appeals court decision directly conflicted with other court rulings and egregiously wastes judicial and party resources with no apparent benefit. Lawyers for the Palmquists countered that the company had significantly overstated disagreements among the federal appeals courts on the question, finding there was no meaningful split on the question before the court. Traveling to the UK, you need to apply and pay a fee first. Visitors from visa-exempt countries, including most Europeans and travelers from the US and Canada, are now required to have an electronic travel authorization, and here's what to know. Travelers from the United States, Canada, and most European countries who do not require visas to enter the United Kingdom now need to apply for a digital authorization in order to visit or, in some cases, transit through the country. The electronic travel authorization, called ETA and linked to a traveler's passport, lasts 2 years. The requirement was introduced in the late 2023 for nationals of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and 4 other Gulf nations, and from February 25th extends to all visa-exempt travelers, including those from the European Union, the United States, and Canada. Some travelers connecting through airports in the United Kingdom will also need to apply for the ETA, but only if they pass through border control. The ETA system is a part of a mission to deliver a more streamlined digital immigration system that will enhance border security, according to a news release from the British Home Office. Here's what you need to know about the ETA and the process to apply. It's not a visa. The ETA is for short-term visits under 6 months and only for visa-exempt travelers. The full list of applicable nationalities is available online. The ETA does not replace existing visa policies, which require citizens of dozens of countries and territories to apply for and receive a visa to enter the United Kingdom. British and Irish citizens, visa holders, and those granted permission to live, work, or study in the United Kingdom do not need to apply for the ETA. The ETA doesn't replace the need for passports to enter the United Kingdom. Travelers can apply online or through an app. Applications are accepted online or through the ETA app. All travelers, including infants and children, need ETAs, though applications can be submitted on behalf of other travelers. To apply, you need the applicant's passport, photo, and payment. Credit cards, debit cards, Apple Pay, and Google Pay are accepted forms of payment. You are asked to answer a set of security questions and to provide contact information. Details about your travel plans are not necessary. The price, 16 British pounds, or about $22, is expected to rise to 20 British pounds, though the government has not set a date for the increase. Most decisions will be rendered within 3 days, according to the British government, and travelers will be notified by email. The ETA is valid for multiple journeys over a 2-year period, but if your passport expires earlier, so does your ETA. It's linked to your passport, which means there is no physical document. Rejected applicants can apply again. Though ETA processing is mostly automated, a caseworker will review an application before it's rejected or refused, said Kelly Chua, director at the global immigration firm Fragaman. Travelers who have their ETA applications rejected can apply again, and they will be told why their application was unsuccessful. A rejection could stem from an incomplete application, such as biometrics not being captured, Ms. Chua added. Applicants who are not granted an ETA will need to apply for a visa. Applicants could be refused because of the previous cancellation of a visa, having unpaid litigation costs, using false documents, or a recent criminal conviction, according to the British Home Office. What if I'm connecting through the UK? Travelers with connecting flights in the United Kingdom will only need to apply for an ETA if they pass through border control. If you are connecting to an international flight and your bags are checked through to your final destination, you do not need an ETA, but if you change airports or have to collect and recheck your bags for any reason, an ETA is required. The ETA is distinct from ETIAs. The European Union is planning to enact a similar program for visa-exempt travelers called the European Travel Information and Authorization System, or ETIAS. That program has been repeatedly delayed and is now expected to begin in late 2026. This travel authorization, required to enter 30 European countries, will cost €20 or roughly $23. This will apply to an estimated 1.4 billion people from countries including the United Kingdom, Australia, and the United States who are currently travel visa-free throughout much of Europe. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Trump administration live updates. Democrats say Americans did not hear the truth in State of the Union speech. What we're covering today, the State of the Union, President Trump used much of the State of the Union address on Tuesday night to berate Democrats, offering new policy proposals while portraying the country as winning under his leadership. In the Democrats' formal rebuttal, Governor Abigail Spanberger accused Mr. Trump of lying about the economy, while other Democrats boycotted the speech or rallied on the National Mall. In his remarks, Mr. Trump introduced few new policies and instead appeared to relish the theatrics of the moment. He attacked Democrats as crazy for not standing for or applauding his priorities, especially on crime, immigration, and the economy. Mr. Trump offered a rosy picture of the U.S. economy, supported by dubious claims, and mocked Democrats' focus on affordability. Governor Abigail Spanberger of Virginia delivered her party's formal response to the president's address, accusing Mr. Trump of hurting the economy with tariffs and sowing chaos with his policies. Speaking before a supportive crowd in Williamsburg, Virginia, Ms. Spanberger began her remarks by telling viewers that Mr. Trump lied to them about the economy. "We did not hear the truth from our president," she said. Dozens of Democrats skipped the event and others left during the speech. Representative Al Green, Democrat of Texas, was escorted from the House chamber after holding up a sign reading "Black people aren't apes," a retort to a racist video posted on the president's social media account earlier this month. About 90 minutes into the speech, Mr. Trump spoke about Iran, the topic that much of the world was most eager to hear about. However, even as the president considers an attack on the country, his address did little to explain why the United States has gathered the largest amount of U.S. military firepower in the Middle East since the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Mr. Trump reprised his threat to attack Iran if diplomatic efforts fail to reach a deal to limit its nuclear program. U.S. officials, including Steve Witkoff, the president's special envoy, and Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, were scheduled to hold another round of negotiations with Iran on Thursday in Geneva. Dr. Casey Means, President Trump nominee for Surgeon General, walked a careful line when asked about pesticides at her confirmation hearing. She said that while she had the utmost respect for the American farmer and understood that changing things overnight would devastate both farmers and consumers, the American food supply needed to move away from the relying on toxic chemicals that are hurting human health. Long term, Dr. Means has long spoken out about the dangers of pesticides, an issue that has become a flashpoint for the MAHA movement. Senators Bill Cassidy and Bernie Sanders pressed Dr. Casey Means on her stances on vaccines and whether they were linked to autism. She said that while she supports vaccination, she wants parents to have thorough conversations with doctors beforehand. Dr. Means also said that while she is not here to complicate the issue on vaccines, the administration was studying the causes of autism. I think it's important to just keep it on the table, she said. Chicago's snowplow naming contest got political. The pick, abolish ICE. An annual contest usually draws lighthearted quips. This year, Chicagoans chose a political pun. Each winter, Chicago's annual You Name a Snowplow contest brings out the creative, the cutesy, the sentimental, the painfully punny. This year, the clear winner is political. The new snowplow is named Abolish ICE. Abolish ICE, chosen soon after the Trump administration conducted an aggressive and broadly unpopular immigration crackdown in Chicago, came in first among more than 13,300 proposed snowplow names offered by the public, city officials said this week. Nearly 40,000 people cast votes on 25 finalists. In second place was Stephen Colbert, named after the talk show host who spent his formative comedy years in Chicago. The third place was Pope Ferrero, a homage to Pope Leo, who hails from the south suburbs of Chicago. Abolish ICE will soon be stamped on the side of a snowplow truck and could be spotted around the streets of Chicago the next time a snowstorm hits. Chicago is divided into 6 snow districts and each year a new truck in each of the 6 districts is adorned with the name chosen by voters. The contest, which began in 2023 under Mayor Lori Lightfoot, has never turned quite so newsy. In previous years, the top entries have nodded to Chicago's accomplishments in architecture, city leveling disasters, a popular landmark whose years-old name change remains unacknowledged by the residents, Sears Plower, heroic Polish-born figures of the Revolutionary War celebrated mostly in Chicago, Kazimierz Pulaski. People who nominated the 6 winning entries will be offered city-themed swag in an unveiling event at a Salt Dome, a facility for the storage of road salt, and the chance to pose with the snowplow they named. The names of those who proposed this year's winning entries have yet to be made public. Ryan Gage, a spokesman for the city's Department of Streets and Sanitation, referred questions about the Abolish ICE entry to the mayor's office. The annual contest, he said, is a great opportunity to showcase the unmatched creativity and civic pride from Chicagoans and highlight the hard work of the city's staff in clearing the roads of ice and snow. Chicago's fleet of powder blue snow fighting vehicles is robust and organized, a welcome sight on the city's streets throughout winter. There are more than 300 trucks that clear snow and dump salt on thousands of miles of roads around Chicago, and more than 400,000 tons of salt is kept in strategically placed piles around the city, the Streets Department said. Mayor Brandon Johnson, who has said that immigration and customs enforcement should be abolished, thanks Chicagoans for joining the contest so enthusiastically. We are grateful and inspired by the record-breaking participation in the contest this year, Mr. Johnson, a Democrat, said in his statement. Online accusations in Guthrie abduction leave one family member scared numb. A 5th grade teacher and his principal wife hid in their bedroom as dozens of people who believed he might be a kidnapper appeared on the suburban street. A 6-year-old boy in Arizona spent his first night away from his parents this month, not because he was at a sleepover or away at camp. It was because people had descended on his parents' suburban Tuscan street, thinking that his father might be the man who had abducted Nancy Guthrie. The boy's father, Dominic Evans, a 48-year-old elementary school teacher, plays drums in a band with one of Miss Guthrie's sons-in-law. For some people, that coupled with Mr. Evans' 1999 arrest for drunkenly swiping a calculator and watch while at a bar was enough. He became their prime suspect. The accusations were levied online, but they have become a real-life nightmare for Mr. Evans and his wife. They hid in their bedroom with the lights off that night, too frightened to pick up their son from his grandmother's house for fear of being followed. Days later, another swarm of journalists, live streamers, and gawkers photographed the family's home and knocked on their neighbors' doors. The couple, who had met years ago in the copy room of the school where they worked, have tried to live a private life in a quiet neighborhood where they are raising 3 boys. Instead, they have become the latest victims of America's internet-enabled fascination with crime and amateur efforts to solve the disappearance of Miss Guthrie, the 84-year-old mother of the television host Savannah Guthrie. It doesn't matter that Mr. Evans spoke to investigators 2 weeks ago for roughly 40 minutes and hasn't heard from them since. On social media, there are people who are sure the ski-masked man at Miss Guthrie's doorstep in the early hours of February 1st was Mr. Evans. It's in the eyes, they say. Mr. Evans and his wife Andrea spoke publicly for the first time in an interview with the New York Times in Tucson this week. Both were often near tears as they described a blur of disturbing events. "I feel like someone's taken my name," Mr. Evans said, "but for what reasons, I don't know. Monetary, clickbait to be relevant, entertainment, but there are innocent people that get hurt." Sheriff Chris Nanos of Pima County, Arizona, who is leading the investigation with the FBI, said in an interview that he was frustrated by many of the accusations. He said he did not want to publicly rule out anyone beyond Miss Guthrie's relatives and their spouses, whom he cleared last week, but he said he felt for Mr. Evans. "He's going through hell, and it is horrible," Sheriff Nanos said, "and I don't know what to tell him except he probably should be speaking with some attorneys and sue some of these people for libel. I wish I could jump out and defend every single one of them that's been falsely accused," he added. Mr. Evans' connection to the Guthrie family began in 2007 when he joined a rock band called Early Black with Tommaso Conione after responding to a Craigslist ad, and the two started jamming regularly with a guitarist. At some point, the bassist mentioned that he was married to the older sister of Savannah Guthrie, the Today Show host. Mr. Evans said he met Nancy Guthrie only once, in 2011, when he brought his oldest son to hunt for Easter eggs at her home. Mr. Evans recalls vividly what he was doing, that he learned what something had happened to her. It was the night of February 1st, and he and his wife were putting their 2 younger sons to bed in separate rooms, each lying with one son until he fell asleep. As Ms. Evans scrolled through Instagram from her son's bed, she saw that Miss Guthrie had been reported missing. She texted her husband in the other room, and he responded in disbelief. On February 10th, the day that the investigators released footage from Miss Guthrie's doorbell camera, people began to speculate whether the man pictured wearing a mask and carrying a pistol was Mr. Evans, posting side-by-side images of the two and analyzing their eyes, brows, and lashes. Days later, on February 13th, Mr. Evans asked his school's principal to hold a brief staff meeting where Mr. Evans addressed the speculation with other teachers and said he would be taking a few days off. That week, he also met with investigators from the FBI and the county sheriff's department, who he said had asked about his band, his friendship with Mr. Cioni, and his whereabouts on that night Miss Guthrie was taken. This one felt really scary because it was like everyone was waiting for someone to come to our house. In recent days, the accusatory onslaught against Mr. Evans has eased, and he's been able to go back to teaching. He said he had gotten support from colleagues and the parents of his 5th graders who he had feared might believe speculation posted online. "None of this is real, but there's so much of it," Miss Evans said of the speculation. "How can anyone decipher or catch all of it?" You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the February 25th issue of the New York Times. Your reader has been Claudia, and I thank you for listening.